again, my friends. It is Ray over at CigarClimatology, and we are going to start another edition here of Cigar Keeping 101. It seems that when I get asked questions, sometimes they seem to come in groups. And lately, I've had a lot of questions about fans, circulation, and fan mounting, believe it or not. So I recently put a video up which was just a personal note video to a customer that I just went ahead and made public because it had a lot of information about the circulation process in a humidor. And while I might end up remaking that video, it might be helpful for anyone who's interested to review that video somewhat. To paraphrase it just a little bit, I'm a believer that if you're interested in making your humidor work better and be more consistent overall, you need to adapt a circulation strategy. So what do I mean by that? If we take a fan, just for instance this fan, which is an 80 millimeter fan, I've got this one labeled at 51.5 CFM. So this fan will put out a goodly amount of air. 50 CFM is a large amount of air, and we point it in any old direction. We're more or less simply moving and conveying air from, say, A to B. And if we use several fans and they're just randomly placed and randomly directed, you might see where you have fans working against each other instead of in harmony with each other. And that's more or less my point about a circulation strategy. The latest iteration of some of my humidor designs are based around the systematic conveying of air. And for that, I use ducted systems such as this one. And you can see, while there's two holes here, this hole is primarily designed for the purposes of mounting, to get to the back mounting pad. And you might be able to see here that there's a slotted screw hole here, which allows for some adjustment of this mounting pad. But one of the other things and one of the reasons why I made it the way I made it, was so that if I wished to pick up air from the two ports independent of each other, I could go ahead and add a fan at either location in order to do that. But that really wasn't the primary goal. The primary goal was to take air off the top, whether it be warm air or cool air, depending upon how your system works and where your cooler is, and convey it down to the bottom of the cooler, and then use supplemental fans to direct air in certain areas to provide a motion of air constantly inside your humidor. And that's the gist of what this does. And today it's what I'm considering a superior humidor theory, a circulation plan which uses the least number of fans necessary to properly distribute and redistribute both the heat in the form of air and water on the interior of the humidor. So that's part one, and again, that's just a little reiteration of a previous video that I made. So let's move the camera over here and let's just talk about a couple of ideas, because like you, it's important to me to be able to mount and move things, and again, to be able to have a neat interior to my humidor. And with that, you can actually store more cigars because you don't have appliances hanging out all over the place. So the idea is, when you're talking about a circulation scheme or a system, you want to try and make it so that it's the least intrusive into your humidor as it possibly can be, allowing you to move the most air that you can without substantially reducing the space in your humidor, or without creating excess heat in the form of the number of fans that you use. So let's come on over and look at the table, and I'll just give you some ideas. So here we are back at the table, and like I said, the next topic for discussion here will be the mounting of your fans. Now, what I was going to do is I was going to grab a couple of standoffs to kind of explain to you the easiest. So let's start with an individual fan, regardless of size, and the basics on mounting a fan like this. Now, again, my primary concern and motivation today is to move the greatest amount of air with the least amount of fan power, taking up the least amount of space. So that's how I approach this problem. And so what that's done is it's forced me into the use of what I call ducted assemblies. Okay, and this, for example, is one of my ducted assemblies. Now, this actually happens to be an assembly designed for the evaporative cooler fan, okay, or it's used in conjunction with one of my humidors to feed the cold space, the evaporator space in one of my humidors. But as you can see, regardless of how of how it's made, it's typically set up using what I call a standard fan port. So this is ported for an 80mm fan. And then the air that it conveys to another location is via the same type of port, even though there may not be a fan attached to it. But just for the sake of argument, I tend to use the same pattern of fan port for just about everything I do. This, for example, is a 60mm fan port. So this will fit a 60mm fan. So in a lot of cases, I do believe that it's vastly superior to set up your circulation scheme via the use of a duct and ducted fan products that will shuttle the air and the water inside your humidor to specific locations to meet your specific design intentions and your specific desires to move air and water from A to B in your humidor. Now, of course, everyone might not have the ability to make or do that, so that's fine. Let's talk a little bit about some basics, and probably the easiest way to set up any type of fan for use inside of your humidor will be what I call the standoff method, or the use of a standoff. And very simply, if this fan spins this direction, and it does, you can just look at the arrow there. Let's look at this actually just very crudely. I'm sorry, I didn't pick screws that were long enough. But if we set up the fan at the end of a series of standoffs, it allows the fan to pick up air from the area that's offset, and then of course convey it in one direction. Obviously, you cannot put a fan up against the blank wall and have it work. That's there's no supply there. It simply won't work that way. So the simplest method would be to acquire the fasteners of the correct length and a standoff that you believe will allow for sufficient circulation of of air into the fan's intake, and be done with it. That's the simplest, fastest, easiest approach. Now, of course, in my opinion, all fans should have a guard. I make finger guards that, well, they're just custom designed by me for use in my appliances. They have a kind of a themed look about them. But this is an archaic heater of mine. As you can see, before I was making my own finger guards, and any one of a number of these wire or otherwise plastic finger guards will do. I think it serves you well by keeping the corner of a box or something in there from hitting your fan, possibly binding your fan and or burning your fan out. I think that is I think that's a good idea. Now, moving from one form of fan mounting to another, this would probably be the next simplest form as I see it, and this is what I call a fan box. Okay, again, this is fairly simple, but it is something that's machine made. It's the thing that I like about it is that in many ways it's an integral fan unit. You can put feet at the bottom of this, and you can lay it on top of boxes, and you can collect the air here and distribute it out of the ports on the side. You can collect from the ports on the side and distribute it this way. You can do many different types of things with this type of fan product. Now, if you have a slim enough series fan, you can actually make these relatively small by mounting the fan inside the box, and perhaps using a box with a bit more depth, or a fan that is a bit shallower, which would allow air pickup from behind the fan here. Typically, I wouldn't use a fan that was this thick. Okay, but in a situation like this, you could certainly mount the fan on top. I would typically use, like I said, a shallower fan. This just happens to be a 60 millimeter, but I would use a shallower fan, and as you can see, there's plenty of room for incoming air. It makes the box relatively slim and easy to deal with. Again, you can pick up the air here, you can just distribute it out the sides or this way and out the front. Just depends on the way that you direction the fan. Now, you can of course put holes in the back of this, and if you have a wood humidor, you can simply use a wood screw, and you can attach this to the back or to the side or to a drawer, underneath a drawer or shelf inside your humidor. And that allows the fan to do its thing and not fall all over the place and get in everyone's way. Now, since I try to build in a lot of flexibility in my humidors, I use a number of different means to do this. One is DIN rail mounting. And if you guys are not familiar with DIN rail, this is a sample of same. So this is a small piece of DIN rail. And in this case, what you would do is you would actually mount the DIN rail inside of your humidor somewhere, okay? And then you would hang your fan on the DIN rail via the use of a DIN rail clip, which is something like this, okay? And so, I mean, I sell these things. I use this method to attach all forms of things inside of my humidors. And fans just happen to be one of them. I also use these to hold my sensor, etc. But if you, say, had a wood humidor, you attached a nice piece of DIN rail to the side of your humidor, maybe one to the top, you can see that by using the DIN rail clip, again, assuming that it would be here attached to the back of the box, you can go ahead and attach that at anywhere, in a number of different locations, and if it pivots around this, you can essentially focus the fan and you can do several things with it. So this is a really good method. It's something that I like and that I use quite often inside my humidors. I don't know anyone else who uses the DIN rail like I do and the DIN rail clips, but again, that's just simply what I do. Now, again, there are many different types of boxes or different things that you could use to convey air. This happens to be a small box that I used to make. I usually ended up giving a bunch of these things away because they got a little bit obsolete for me, but they're still very useful for some people. A box like this with terminals on the fan. You could float this around inside of your humidor. Again, you could put 4 feet on it, and you could blast air any one of a number of different directions depending upon where you pointed it. This has one plugged end, it has one open end, and it's what I used to refer to as a shotgun fan, because you could simply take it, and even if you just set it on top of boxes, you could control airflow based with this very simple mechanism that doesn't even really require any mounting. If you wanted to mount it, again, could be mounted on a clip and then on a DIN rail. Again, really, really easy. I make, like I said, a number of different grills and a number of different things. I think any fan product that you use should probably have some kind of finger guard on it. One of the other things that also might be helpful in your situation would be to use an offset and then your finger guard, offsetting the finger guard away from the fan so that if you push something up against it, the fan still has the ability to pick up air, because the offset doesn't allow a box or your cigars to go right up against the fan. So again, that's just another sound means for circulation. As I've stated, I've made many different kinds of boxes, many different kinds of designs, depending upon exactly where I wanted to put the air and what I wanted to house inside the ducted product. Again, this is a newer design of an enclosed heater. As these have morphed a bit with more sophisticated designs, hopefully this will fit in here. Maybe not, that duct might be a little thick. Does fit here. With more sophisticated designs, you can come up with all kinds of systems by which you can collect air and water from one area and then focus it to another area. Again, these are just innovative designs of mine, either that I have used or I now use, or etc., etc., to convey air from one area of the humidor to another. Again, this could be put on a longer ducted product, which would allow you to convey air from back in a corner somewhere to all the way up around in front of the door. Again, just another idea. So that is really the gist of it. Now, if you don't wish to use something like this, that's fine. In a solid surface humidor like I build, of course, you can use some very high bond strength double-sided tape. 3M and a number of companies make these products, and you can just go ahead and stick them right on the side of your humidor when you have an enclosure or a box such as this. Again, if you're only using the bare fan, you're a bit limited to what you can do with a standoff and screwing holes in the side of your humidor. You're not going to have a whole lot of options. So there, I've gone ahead and I've taken you through it. I've given you some ideas on how I mount fans and how I mount appliances in humidors. One of the most flexible, like I said, is the DIN rail method. The other would be the use of very high bond strength tapes. If you wanted to go that way, unfortunately, if you place the fan in the wrong spot or you can't get to it to replace it, you might end up tearing up your wood products, getting that very high bond strength film or tape off the inside of your humidor. So you do have to be careful with what you do there. In many cases, I will actually use that high bond strength tape to attach my DIN rail inside of my solid surface humidor. You might have seen this in other videos, and then I might attach my sensor or a ducted fan product or something to the side of the humidor. in that way. Again, there are many ways to do this. This was a design that I had. I was using it for something, I don't recall which. It was a circulation pattern, I believe, that involved a very low profile duct behind one of my backs with a very low profile fan. It depending upon your ability to make products, the sky's pretty much the limit as far as when you have the tools and the ability to make certain things. So there you go. That concludes the video on hanging fans. Thanks for watching, and if you guys have any questions, which I know a lot of you do, just go ahead and send me an email at CigarClimatology@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to help you work through some of your issues given the time.